I used some sealer on the inside of the fuel tank, and the filler neck has a lip that sticks down inside of the tank. To get the sealer to drain all the way out, I took out the bottom plug. That means there's sealer in these threads here. So I'm going to clean that out with a tap and put the shutoff valve in. I'm going to put some thread sealer tape on here. I'm trying to visualize how the tank sits in the tractor, because I don't want to turn this too far. I want the outlet pointing the right way, so I'm going to do my final tightening after the tank and the engine are both installed, so I can see which way I want it pointing. There's some clearance in these bolt holes here, so there's a potential to have things a little bit crooked. I like to push the engine to one side of the frame so the front and the rear bolts are touching the holes, and that helps keep the engine square to the frame. Here's what it looks like out in the sunshine. Next, I want to route the fuel line. So I want to put this belt cover back on, just so all the parts are there when I'm looking at it. You can see the outlets pointing right at the fuel tank platform. So now I'm going to tighten this a little bit more and get it pointed the way I want it. Here's the bracket that's going to hold the fuel line. It still needs cleaned up and straightened. I want the fuel line to curve around the oil filler plug. So it should end up right about there. Coming around the front, I need enough length to curve around the governor. This type of a nipple needs to have a hose clamp on it. This newer type of nipple can be used without a hose clamp if your fuel line's in good condition, but I'm going to put one on there anyways. You can't just pull the fuel line off of these nipples. You got to kind of push it off by getting a screwdriver or something behind it. Try to position your hose clamp so it's not in the way, and you won't be catching your fingers on it when you work the shutoff valve. Here's the old fuel line clamp. It's pretty rusty, kind of distorted, and it looks like somebody put a dent in the top. So I got this 1/2-inch dowel pin, and that's about the same size as the fuel line. So I'm going to try to straighten this thing up. I got the round part about where it should be, but the holes in the top layer and the bottom layer don't line up. So I need to bend both tabs back to get the front tab in the shape it should be. But then I gotta straighten the back tab without changing the front. That looks better there. I think that'll work. I think this end goes up like this, but first I need to clean out the bolt hole. The muffler's in the way, so I can't turn the tap wrench. But I got these nifty tap extensions. They come in pretty handy. That looks like it's up too high. I'm going to put the belt guard on to see what kind of clearance it's got. That's too high. I'm going to turn this bracket around. Well, that's better, but it's too close to the dipstick. I'm going to move on and think about it. Well, I blew into the fuel tank to create a little pressure, and it's leaking out of the fuel pump. Looks like it's coming out the side of this square part. It's also coming out around the carburetor bowl, so the needle and seat's not working either. I'm going to go ahead and rebuild the carburetor off camera, because I already showed taking it apart and putting it back together once. This time I'll use these new parts. This is a vacuum operated fuel pump. A mechanical pump would have an arm sticking out of it. When the piston goes down, the air pressure in the block increases and pushes on the diaphragm. When the piston goes back up, the air pressure in the block decreases and the diaphragm moves the other way. I'm going to check these one-way valves by blowing and sucking on them. The first one seems to work, but the second one don't. It goes both ways. The one-way valves are under this cover here. The camera died when I was taking that apart, but I'll show all the pieces while I'm putting it back together. Looks like there's a lot of corrosion in here, so I'm going to start cleaning stuff with a wire brush. This gasket's pretty hard and dry. I'm going to try to reuse it if I can. This is what the one-way valves look like. The brass ring in the holes are actually the valve seats. This piece is keyed so it only fits in one way. When you get it in there, one brass seat's facing up and the other is facing down. These little round pieces are the valves. They have a rubbery surface to them. And they're held against the seat by these little springs. So on one side, the valve goes in there with the spring on top. And on the other side, the spring goes in there with the valve on top. And you got to get all that put together with all the little parts in the right position. And when all that's put together, you should be able to blow into the inlet, but not suck air back out of the inlet. And on the outlet side, you should be able to suck air out, but not blow air in. So that all seems to be working now. So now I need to cut out a new diaphragm. I found this stuff online, and it is specifically fuel pump diaphragm material, but it appears to be a little bit too thick. I'm going to try it and see if it works. Well, the screw don't fit through that hole, so I got to do it over. Got to get this orientation right. It mounts with the fittings on top like this, and I want the inlet to come in on this side. Now I need to make a gasket. Alright, I'm going to pressurize the system. And that should force fuel through the one-way valves and out the end of the hose there. Okay, let's see if it pumps any fuel out. That should be okay. As long as it pumps more than it uses, it'll work. I'm going to pressurize the system again and check for leaks. Well, that sounded good. I could hear the fuel flowing for a little bit, and then it quit when the needle valve shut. This hose is bugging me still. Can't get it to lay right. So I'm going to take the bracket off and have another look at it. I'm going to loosen up the hose clamp on this end and twist the hose. See how that acts. Well, that looks like that makes it worse. I'm going to twist it the other way. Well, that looks better that way. I think that'll help. I think that'll be okay. I got clearance around the governor up front, and I got clearance around the dipstick in the back. Well, that's as far as I'm going this time, and here's what it looks like. Next time I'll probably do the throttle cable and adjust the governor and see if it'll start. Alright, that's it.